Today's topic is going to be moving as a collector. This is something I don't really hear talked about much, but we've all probably been through it at one point or another, and we all love to show off the cool things that we find as collectors, but nobody really talks about the hard part. What happens when you gotta pack all that shit up and move? Well, I actually did that 2 years ago. The process of moving is already a hassle enough, and depending on how much stuff you have, how valuable, how fragile some of these things are, it can just make the whole process a lot more tedious, and it's something that we don't really think about when we get that epic find. When we're out hunting for our collections, we don't necessarily think about what it's going to be like down the line when we actually have to pack that up and move it somewhere. And of course, how much of a hassle this is depends on what kind of a collector you are. If you're somebody who collects floppy comic books, so I felt inspired to do this video because I recently did a short showing off the updates I've made to my comic room recently. If you go back on my channel far enough, you'll see that for a while I was just filming in front of a black wall, and that's because when I moved into my house a little over 2 years ago now, we had so many other renovations we had to do that this room was the lowest priority just to be able to live comfortably in my house. Now that space is finally starting to come together, but it has been a long process. I'm still going through stuff, and honestly, that's something that has kind of made putting out videos for me a bit of a struggle, because the room that I'm filming in for months was just filled with Rubbermaid bins. I'd just be like sitting around all of these bins that need to be sorted through, and honestly, now that I'm actually going through this, and there still is stuff to go through, the room is still a work in progress, but as you can see by my background, by the short that I put out, you can see that stuff is really starting to come together, and that's something that you really learn when you move with a large collection. Is you start to figure out what things you really value, what you really want to have in your collection versus something you bought on impulse because it was cheap or because it was cool in the moment. I've moved twice in my life. The first time to an apartment when I was significantly younger. I had much less in terms of a collection. I had a fairly large Blu-ray collection, and I had a decent-sized trade paperback collection at the time. I had, some figures, some CDs, but it was a lot more manageable. If you go back far enough on my Instagram, you'll actually see some pictures from my old apartment, and that is where the majority of my collecting happened. And just to give you guys a little bit of context, I didn't have a nerd room at my apartment. My entire apartment was the nerd room. My living room was decked out in Batman stuff, and now that I own my own home, I have a little bit of a different standard for how I want things to be. So that's not to say I won't have some nerdy things here and there throughout the house, but I mainly want to keep it concentrated to just this room, and that's also giving me kind of some limits on what I'm going to be able to display from my collection. And that doesn't mean that I won't rotate things out occasionally, but it's making me really think, really pick and choose what I think is going to fit the current aesthetic I want, what fits my current collecting goals. So as much as it can be a hassle, moving can also give you a good opportunity to really look at your items and think, like, is this something I want in the next chapter of my life? Is this something that when I'm at my new place, I'm going to prioritize displaying this? That's something that I've really had to think about. There were some things that it was a priority for me to find and put it out in this room, and some other things that I'm like, maybe I like it, but it just doesn't necessarily have a place with anything else. So when I did eventually move out of that apartment, I was very overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that I had, and I honestly started packing stuff months in advance because I was in a bit of a bad situation at that apartment where I kind of knew that I had to get myself out of there fast, and I had some safety concerns, and I became more and more nervous about keeping my collectibles there, so I started packing things up months in advance. That's something that I would honestly recommend if you are a collector and you think you're going to be moving within the next 6 months or so. I would give yourself some extra time and just start packing early, because I think that that really helped me get ahead of things. And I know not everyone will have the opportunity. I know some people might need to get out of their situation faster than others, but if you do have the opportunity, I would recommend at least 2 or 3 months before you think you're going to move, start packing up some of your collectibles that you won't immediately need to use, and if you do, keep the boxes labeled so you can easily get to it. And that's something I did, and that was extremely helpful. And for me, I wasn't necessarily thinking about it in a way of getting ahead, but it really, really did help when it got down to crunch time. In my situation, I didn't have a moving crew to help with any of my collectibles. I just moved all of that stuff myself, but we did have a moving crew to help with some of our larger furniture items. But depending on the size of your collection, it might be helpful to consider a moving crew, or at least a group of friends that's willing to help you. And that was more what we did. We had some people that came over and helped us the day of moving. And maybe take this as a time to let some things go that don't really mean much to you. Take a bit of a break from buying stuff. And that's something I really wish I would have done. I definitely did get rid of some stuff, but I wish I would have taken the time to get rid of some more stuff before making the move, because now I feel a bit burdened by some stuff that doesn't necessarily mean much to me. And the stuff that I'm referring to, the stuff that I'm saying doesn't necessarily mean much to me, this was all stuff I got before I started my channel. Stuff that I got in lots. Maybe I was looking for one book and I found a whole lot that had that book in it, and that was the best deal I could get. So that's kind of more the stuff I'm referring to. Is early on in my collecting, before I had as much of a direction, I would just kind of accumulate a lot of stuff at once, and now I kind of sit around a lot of that stuff that doesn't really have any meaning to me, doesn't really fit with any other part of my collection. And another thing to think about is that moving will increase the risk of damaging your collectibles, so you have to be extremely, extremely careful. Anything that might be fragile, make sure that you pack with a lot of care. I would recommend when you make online orders, save as much of the bubble wrap, any of the packing inserts as you can. And if not, just go to the dollar store, get some bubble wrap, get anything you can to protect. If you collect action figures, Funko Pops, anything like that, I would recommend keeping the original box, even if you don't display it in box. I've seen so many people that just chuck the boxes away. It makes it a lot easier for moving, less likely that your items are going to get scratched or damaged in the process. You know, I hear people say all the time, it takes a year to fully move into your house, but when you're a collector and you have all these extra things, comic books, normal books, Blu-rays, CDs, action figures, it can take a little bit longer. And that's why here we are 2 years later and I'm still moving in, I guess you could say. But we're making more progress every day and I'm really happy with how things are going. And so I just wanted to make this video to kind of provide some advice for anyone who might be going through a move this year. And just to hear from you guys, what are some things you've done? Any advice that you would add that you think might help someone out as well? Again, like I said, everyone's situation is going to be different, how much time we have, how much stuff you have, but I feel like this is all stuff that can be helpful because You never know when something might come up, because collecting is supposed to be fun, and we talk about the fun stuff, but I think it's also good to talk about the not so fun stuff so we don't stress ourselves out later down the line. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any crazy moving stories. I'd love to get a bit of a dialogue going down in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe, and have a good day. Peace out.